Hi, welcome to Crash Course. I'm Pradyumn.
And I'm Durga.
And today we'll be talking about rugged individualism and how it relates to the movie American Sniper. Rugged individualism was a term coined by President Herbert Hoover during his time in office. It basically means to pull yourself up by your bootstraps and not rely on any outside assistance or help. This term is often associated with the Navy SEALs and other members of the other branches of the military, and it has been immortalized through movies, novels, etc., etc. However, this ideology has its pitfalls as well, because in situations where there are no bootstraps to pull yourselves up by, what will you do? In those cases, it's often best to accept outside help, which is absolutely okay. The rugged individualism of the US Navy SEALs is a big part of the movie American Sniper. Yet the movie itself goes out of its way to convince viewers that in some situations, outside help is not only advised, but is absolutely crucial. The movie follows Chris Kyle, a US Navy veteran sniper, as he goes on 4 tours of the Iraq War and comes home with a record of 160 confirmed kills. As the movie progresses, Kyle has to deal with numerous problems, including his fraying relationship with his family, balancing his personal and military lives, watching his loved comrades die in front of him, and dealing with PTSD. However, the movie also shows how Kyle recovers from that and goes on to help many others like him in moving on with their lives. Understanding these problems will help us combat war-induced mental disorders and will help us reduce the rate of veteran suicides.
Navy SEALs and other members of the military have to show ideals of rugged individualism during war. They also have to decide the innocence of multiple people during war. When Chris had his first kill, there was a little boy running with a grenade. He was killed. There was also another woman that was also killed. Chris, in these situations, has to decide the innocence of people in a matter of split seconds. This is hard. Later, in a time interview, Kyle said, "It was difficult. I mean, first of all, it's a woman, and there's a child involved. But the story played out in the book. I had to do it to protect the Marines. So do you want to lose your own guys, or would you rather take one of them out?" This event shook up Kyle. That was not the Navy SEAL he had imagined. The next time he was looking at another child target, Kyle thanked God that he didn't pick up the grenade and had to be shot. It takes courage to protect your comrades in situations like this. 1. Navy SEALs also have to witness the death of their beloved comrades. During battle, Biggles, one of Kyle's closest friends, is shot in the face. Although he was transported back to the United States, we later learned that Biggles died during surgery related to the injury. Seeing Biggles with a bloody face traumatized Kyle. He was one of the first comrades that was seriously injured in Kyle's tour. Biggles even wanted Kyle to give the diamond ring to his girlfriend, and this gesture really moved Kyle and gave him the motivation to fight not only for his country, but also his brothers. Mark, another one of Kyle's closest comrades, is killed when he goes back outside to kill Mustafa, the sniper that shot Biggles. Having loved friends die is very tough and leads to mental disorders down the road. In an article to Vanity Fair, Sebastian Junger writes that combat veterans reported killing an enemy soldier or even witnessing one getting killed was more distressing than being wounded oneself. But their very worst experience, by a significant margin, was having a friend die. Navy SEALs also have to be observant and vigilant and accurate at all times. In the film, Chris Kyle provides overwatch so that the convoy can pass safely. He also has to be very observant of his surroundings. In one situation, Kyle notices that a woman is not swinging her arms when she was walking. Finding this odd, he focuses his attention on her, and it turned out that his suspicion was justified. She was carrying a grenade. Kyle also has to be very accurate. In his 4th tour, Kyle had to snipe Mustafa, a highly skilled sniper that was with the terrorists, from over 2,000 feet away. Okay, thought bubble time. We know that rugged individualism, ideals, and war take a toll on one's body. However, it can take a toll on one's family as well. The relationship between Chris and Taya is never static. Ever since Chris became part of the Navy SEALs, their relationship has become rough. It starts on their wedding day, when the dance is interrupted with the news that the US would be in war with Iraq following the 9/11 attacks. Next, when Chris is in Iraq, Taya calls him to tell him the gender of their baby. However, their conversation is interrupted when there's gunfire. Chris drops his phone and runs. Taya is then left thinking that Chris was killed.
Chris!
Another key point in their relationship is when Chris is home and they discuss about his next tour of Iraq. They get in a heated argument and Chris is left to choose between military and family. This is
You're my husband. You're the father of my children, but they're the ones that pull you back.
Yeah, but see, they can't wait and we can.
If you think this war isn't changing you, you're wrong.
a tough choice, and it is one that many other members of the military have to face, unfortunately. Alright, thanks for listening to my thoughts. Now back to the video.
Rugged individualism is sometimes just not possible. When veterans return home, they're faced with many struggles. One of these struggles is post-traumatic stress disorder, or PTSD for short. Many people mistakenly assume that PTSD is old news or has already been dealt with and is therefore not their problem. This is very wrong. PTSD has not been dealt with. In fact, it has not even come close to being dealt with. In the past decade alone, the amount of veterans afflicted with PTSD has risen over nearly 30%. While there are government institutions expressly made for helping veterans afflicted with PTSD, these are ridiculously understaffed, underfunded, and are sometimes less than hopeful. For years after they return home, veterans sometimes suddenly feel afraid, vulnerable, or on edge. They feel that there are too many people around them, or the noises are too loud, or the lights are too bright. This makes them want to go far away and brace for impact somewhere. However, nothing happens. These are all very obvious symptoms of PTSD. In a submission to Gawker, a veteran recalls, after leaving the military, I spent almost a decade fighting and having random emotional erratic outbursts and chalking it up to drinking problems. I started to drink. I spent much time partying, and my family and friends noticed a marked difference in me, but were too worried to mention it to me, as I had also developed temper issues. PTSD can often make people do things that they would never normally do. Eddie Ray Ruth, a former Marine, was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole for the double homicides of Chris Kyle and his friend Chad Littlefield. In an article for CNN, Ed Lavender wrote about Dr. Mitchell Dunn's testimony for Ruth's case. "It is my belief," Dunn said, "that Ruth had a severe mental impairment that caused him to not know what he was doing was wrong." In the movie, Kyle gets anxious and stares at a blank TV as if he can see something. The screams of the children playing outside start to sound like the screams of his fellow soldiers dying. His blood starts pumping, his heart starts racing, his adrenaline starts flowing until he gets up and grips the collar of the dog that he thought was attacking the children. Kyle knows that this is not normal. He's having flashbacks of war, which are causing him to act uncontrollably. He's already lost his comrades, he doesn't want to lose his family again. To get help with dealing with their disorders, veterans often consult Veteran Affairs. However, the problem with this is that the care that is received from the VA is insufficient and ineffective. This is because more and more veterans are applying for veteran disabilities claims, which is stretching the funding thin. A veteran writes to Gawker, "Many veterans are over or under-medicated thanks to the vets from recent wars and ones still living from previous ones. This stretches the government funding thin, and the VA centers are often understaffed, causing a huge problem. The waiting period between filing the application and getting care is often absurdly long as well." A veteran writes to Gawker that he was one of the lucky ones because his application got approved within 2 years. The care is ineffective as well. Wendy Innes, a writer for IVN, writes that over 80% of veterans think that the current VA treatment is ineffective. The VA is the only option for most veterans, however, as they cannot afford any other forms of care. Thankfully, the Clay Hunt Suicide Prevention Act for American Veterans was passed by President Obama in 2015, which mandates a thorough review of all mental health programs and is a very tight-knit security measure. However, the veteran suicide rate is still unreasonably high, with 22 veterans taking their lives every single day. Any effort towards getting that rate to zero should be highly touted and pushed forward as much as possible. Another struggle that veterans face is that they often feel alone or disconnected from society. In the movie, Chris Kyle often gets agitated with his wife Taya because he doesn't understand why people aren't talking about what's happening in Iraq and are just going on with their lives as if nothing is wrong. In an article for Vanity Fair, Sebastian Junger also writes, there are obvious psychological stressors in a group, but there are even more psychological stressors for a person in isolation. The modern soldier is going home from a situation where people are forced into tightly knit groups that simulate what happened in early human society to a society where people often work outside the home. Children are educated by strangers. Personal good often eclipses that of the collective good, and people are often alone. The society is just not welcoming for veterans.
Now it's time for an open letter. Dear Society, I've discussed about how unfit society is to returning veterans. I'd now like to discuss more about that topic. Even though current vets are returning home safer than those of World War II and Korean War, the rates of PTSD are at an all-time high. Anthropological research shows that recovery from war is influenced by the society that one finds when they return home. Some vets say that they'd actually want to go back to war, not for the loss or stress, but for the brotherhood that comes with it. Cooperation and teamwork triggers the release of oxytocin in the human body, generating trust and bonding. A sense of closeness and touch is also very important. In an experiment conducted in the 1950s, baby monkeys were given the option of choosing a wire mesh doll mother that dispenses milk and a cute cuddly doll mother that doesn't dispense any milk. The baby monkeys drank milk from the wire mother, but immediately after finishing, they went straight to the cloth doll mother. It works the same way in humans. We need a tight-knit community for our survival. It also helps when society knows about the war. Our society is independent, for the most part, from what's going on in the military, and this can create some distance between returning vets and the rest of the community. With these two factors, our society is a harsh place for vets. We can only make it better by making our society more of a close-knit community. Sincerely, Durga Pokala.
One of the most important points in American Sniper is that it shows us that rugged individualism is not available as an option in some circumstances. It shows us that it is absolutely okay to ask for help. Better government funding for Veterans Affairs programs and more opportunities for veterans to get help will greatly aid us in our fight to end PTSD, combat disorders, and reduce the rate of veteran suicide. Sometimes there's no bootstrap with which we can pull ourselves up. To be able to understand and treat PTSD, research has to happen and be given sufficient funding. The myriad programs set up right now should be scrapped, and a well-staffed, well-funded, competent program should be put in its place.